Okay, ladies and gentlemen, hello. Be most welcome to this workshop entitled Reconnecting with Young Europeans, a huge responsibility for all of us. I will be moderating this session, and we have until 8, starting now, 4:30. Allow me to introduce very briefly the members of the panel. They will, of course, explain about themselves a little bit further when they take the floor. On my right, I have Frida Seidel, who is a teacher involved in citizens' debates in schools, and he comes from Germany. I have Wietse, did I pronounce correctly? Wietse van Ransbeek. He's founder of Citizen Lab. He comes from Belgium. On my left side, another Belgian, Stefan Hannen, from Hill and Knowlton Strategies. And last but not least, Mrs. Magdalena Starostin, head of the Youth Outreach Unit in the European Parliament. Myself, I am Beatriz Porres. I am the head of the unit for publications, visitors, big events, and cultural activities in the European Economic and Social Committee, which is one of the two institutions that inhabit this building. The other one being, of course, the Committee of the Regions. So I have been requested to moderate this panel. I will not, but this is not about listening to me, so I will very quickly introduce the session and maybe put some issues on the table just as a way to stimulate some thinking. But that is something that will be done much better than me by our panelists. I have been explained, and I suppose all of you too, that 40% of voters in the last European elections were under 35 years old. So that means 13% more than in 2014, which is very good news. And so that's one of the signals that have encouraged everybody, governments and also European institutions, among others, to think of more seriously connecting, communicating, and engaging with young people across Europe. So this is what we are doing here. Another good positive development lately is this movement that all of you know, which is called Fridays for Future, where young people have mobilized themselves on the issue of climate change. So those are positive trends, of course. We have also negative trends that we need to learn lessons from. And you all are aware of the Brexit process, of course. And statistics have shown that in the referendum on Brexit, a huge amount of young people simply didn't vote. And this is one of the reasons why people analyzing the results of this referendum consider that the referendum result was negative. So this means that something went wrong, something was not done properly, and this political situation did not appeal to young people. So these are just three symptoms. We could mention much more. Issues in which awareness is growing about the need to really do much more in terms of involving young people in political thinking and political decision making. So this is what we have invited our panelists here. I'd like to put three questions on the table before they start talking. One is, if we didn't manage to reach to the young people, maybe we are not using the right language. So what is the language that we have to use? Is it the Eurocratese, as they say, or Europeish language, or is it something else? Maybe people in the audience and the panelists can tell us if they have any ideas on that. Are we communicating properly? Are we using the right language with young people? Second question I'd like to raise for your consideration during the debate is, yes, young people are getting organized. That's very good. It's really a very good thing. But certainly they are not getting organized in the old traditional way. I mean, I represent an institution that represents organized civil society interests in the European Union, but it's the old way of representation. The way in which young people are organizing themselves is completely different. So is this good? Is this bad? Is this sustainable? Is this, what could we do in order to encourage it and to make it sustainable, to make these organizations to last and to become effective? And the third question that comes to my mind is that, yes, we are all making a big effort to bring the European Union to the young people, but we are also making a big effort to bring the young people to the European Union. And this is, for instance, something that my own institution is doing. Every year we have this big event with young students from schools, 16 to 17-year-olds, in which we bring them there from schools all across the European Union and candidate member states to get together to discuss the big issues that concern the European Union. And next year it will be about climate change, of course. So it is also an effort in which we have young people coming here. Is that enough? Should we do more? And how? Something for you to consider. All right, I'll stop here and give the floor first to Magdalena Stalostin from the European Parliament. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me well. I work as a head of unit in the Youth Outreach Unit in the European Parliament, DG COM. The unit is in charge of basically implementing the youth strategy, so putting in place sort of in a coordinated way to manage all the currently run activities aimed at youth. And we have plenty, because we have plenty of visitors. We do our own simulation every month in Strasbourg. We are present at schools with ambassador school program, etc., etc. So now our goal is to put it in a common, consistent framework. But for the topic of today, I would like to talk to you about the I, which is the acronym for the European Youth Event. I have a slide. So I don't know how many of you have heard about the I, and I'm not asking my team who is present here. Okay. Few hands raised. I'll just say quickly what it is. A few hands. So the European Youth Event, it's the biggest public event that the European Parliament organizes. It attracts more and more young people. With every edition, we had 8,500 people last year during 2 days in Strasbourg, and we expect the same or more next year. It's an event which happens every 2 years, and you could call it some sort of a you could think it's a political festival. So young people come from all over Europe and beyond to discuss public policy issues among each other, but also with the decision makers. And the age group is 16 to 30 years old. And the objective of the event is to bring together Indo-European young people together with the inspiring speakers and decision makers, and to engage with each other. So it's not about that they all reach a consensus and write a resolution at the end, or make some sort of proposals for the council, but actually it's just really to create an opportunity to have this two-way communication. And before and during the event, what we do, we collect the ideas that young people have for different issues on all different topics that you can imagine. And we bring them in the form of a report to the members of the European Parliament, and later also at the hearings in the Parliament. So why this concept is working, and why is it attractive for young people, and why does it allow them to engage? We think that there are several principles that are key success factors, but the most important is very simple, is that we step back as an institution and as members of the Parliament, and we just listen, and it's the young people who speak. So this is really a game changer, because when you come as a young person to an institution or European institution and you meet an MEP, it can be very intimidating and you don't really know what your place is. So what we do, we just leave them the arena, the space, and we allow them to take the stage. And we do exactly the opposite. We just listen, we note down what they say, and we also, the members do the same, the members of the European Parliament. So taking it from there, what happens is that we also don't tell or don't decide for the participants what will be the topics that they will be discussed. It's, we invite them to give us the topics, to suggest us the speakers that they want to meet, to give us idea for what should be the theme of the event. So in that way, with former and future participants, we make sure that the event and its content will fully reflect their needs. What we did, for example, for the next edition, which we are preparing right now and which will take place next year in Strasbourg in May, we ran for 2 months an online survey asking for topics, for speakers, for themes, and actually most of the best speakers suggestions we got came from the young people themselves and not from the experts on policies that we are in touch with. The rule also for us is that the speakers that we have at the Eye should be in the same age range. So they are maximum 35 years old. So it's not only event for young people, but it's also done by young people. And like that, it makes us also more credible. So this is, let's say, the way how we co-design the event with young people, but what works even better is a co-creation. So half of the program of the European Youth event is actually organized by youth organizations and by the participants themselves, because they also propose activities that we include. And how we do it, we use the call for proposals, so the grant scheme, and calls for applications to support financially and logistically the best activities proposed by youth organizations and by young people, and to allow them to take place during the Eye. And by the way, if you know of a group of young people who could organize something, we still have a call open on our website. Check the details. Until 17th of November, we are looking for suggestions. Another principle which is very important is that the formats at the Eye have to be interactive. So we don't want to have a panel like here today where there are people speaking and after there's a few questions for those who dare to ask. We try to avoid that, which is not always easy with the setting of the rooms in the institutions, but it's definitely not a series of panel debates. There is a zillion of different formats, speed dating, world cafes, workshops, you name it. So often what we even allow is that the members that are present don't even sit on the panel, they can sit in the audience. It's not them who are the protagonists of the event. For the language that you mentioned, so we put a lot of effort into not using the institutional language. We try to use the language the young people use. We work a lot with our trainees and with young people that are in our team. So just have a look at our website and see for yourself. We don't even shy away from controversy because this is what works. And finally, we deliver what we promise. So we actually collect the ideas of young people and we bring them to the decision makers in the report, and then later on in autumn we always organize youth hearings, which is basically at the standard parliamentary committees. Selected participants come and present the most concrete ideas, and they get a feedback from members. So there is a discussion on some of the ideas. And so I think to conclude, in our view, for a public institution to engage successfully with young people, must bring these two worlds together, this of young people who are don't trust politicians and who are not really finding their place in the traditional politics. And that of the politicians who often are either disconnected or they have a problem to really find the right way to engage. And this is what happens, this is what we try to do. We do it in the parliament, but we leave the parliament to young people. So my take from is that the co-design and the co-creation is the way to go, because it shows that we respect the young people, that we don't want to tell them what to talk about. We don't pick topics for them that suit them. We let them choose, and we leave them the floor, and we leave them to be the protagonists of that event. And this creates participation, and it can spark the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Magdalena. I feel very guilty now that indeed this is the format that we don't want to, we shouldn't be using anymore. Not that I was consulted on it, but all right. Maybe organizers will around in the room will take note. But of course, it's not only this format. I mean, the event is much more diverse. So just to let you know that I took note of the request. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I will go to our next speaker, who is it Stefan? No, it's Wietse. Please.
All right. Thank you very much for the invitation, first of all. So my name is Wietse Vransbeek. I'm the founder of Citizen Lab, which is a digital democracy platform for local governments. I'm going to first talk a bit or introduce Citizen Lab, and then afterwards I will also try to answer your questions, get to case studies and some learnings. Starting from, I do have some slides actually, if you could take your time. So starting from my own story, and I do feel still young at 26 years old, but I started about 4 years ago when I was still in university. And I felt pretty frustrated about the fact that as a young citizen here, I'm from Brussels, that I wanted to engage, but that I would need to go to a town hall meeting on a Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, and it takes a lot of time to actually get engaged. And that was for me the way to think, all right, we go vote every 6 years, but I want to be more continuously engaged without necessarily needing to go into party politics. So I wanted to engage as a citizen, and that's why we started Citizen Lab. And I saw that I was not alone. There are many others, young Europeans, who are feeling the same. If you just look at the numbers, this is from a survey taken in 2016, you see that actually 80% of the European youth is saying, all right, we experience a lack of transparency. We don't feel heard, so really the deficit of legitimacy. But then, on the other hand, you do see that they do want to participate, and obviously there are good signs these days. People or youngsters are hitting the streets. So this data here indicates that it's more than a majority that says, all right, I want to actively participate. So what I believe is really a key element here is that we pick the right tools. Not only the right language, that's one thing, but also the right tools. I was just speaking about physical activities, but also, so that is consuming a lot of time, not only for the citizens, also for the governments. So also to give you some context, we as Citizen Lab, we're mainly working on the local level. And social media, that is the first move that we've made to opening up the dialogue and getting everyone online, but it's not a constructive tool to organize participatory processes. It's a communication tool. It's not a tool to run consultations, and that's a very important difference. The government is not owning the data, it's Facebook that is owning the data, and that is a key aspect. So what do we want to do? We want to improve the legitimacy and efficiency of public decisions. Legitimacy is referring to the reach. We want to get more people engaged. And the efficiency is more referring to the fact that those participatory processes, they should be efficient because we want to institutionalize them. We don't want it to be a one-off project that is taking a lot of time for the civil servants. It needs to get into a workflow for the civil servants and needs to fit well with how they actually work today. So it needs to be easy not only for the citizen, but we also believe that it needs to be easy for the government. Just in a nutshell, how Citizen Lab works, but I'm going to go a bit faster over that. So it's 3 steps: engaging citizens using different tools, then having a whole management system to manage all the input that comes in, engage internally, so to get feedback from the different departments. And then finally, and that is also a huge leverage of technology, it's not only about giving a stage to many more people and getting more diversity in the opinions, but there's also technology such as text analytics and artificial intelligence that can help with the processing of all the data. Because once you have not 20 people who are giving the say, but you've got 2,000 contributions, then it takes weeks for the civil servants to process it into insights for decision making. And that is a necessary step, that it's going to feed into decision making, that it's not just a sham participation, that it's like, hey, we've put up a survey and we've heard you, but that it's leading to decision making, or at least supporting decision making. So yeah, that's the ladder of participation that you might know. Key here is also that you use a variety of tools, not only to consult the citizens, but also to give them a say on what they should be consulted on. So then I'm referring to citizen initiatives. We're already seeing with the European Citizen Initiative that that's, I think, definitely a first great move. Also at local level, there is often legislation already in place, but it's still such a bothersome process. If people need to go physically door to door, then obviously you might see 1-2 initiatives per year that get communicated to the council, and there is way more potential for that. So some case studies. So we worked with the city of Leuven, here in Belgium, not too far from here, on their multi-annual strategic plan. And why did I choose Leuven? Because we're talking here about youth, and actually more than a third of the participants are under 30 years old. It's a city of about 100,000 inhabitants, and they had a say on how the budgets should be designed, or how the budget should be allocated for the coming 5 years in the strategic plan. The key message I want to give here with this case study of the city of Leuven is that in a consultation or in a participatory process, there needs to be a stake for the participant. They need to care about it, and it needs to have an impact on their lives. We've seen also many consultations. I could also put up a case study here about how we should name the next swimming pool. That happens too, and it can go into a mix, but if you want to make people participate at a scale, they need to feel affected. They need to feel that there is something at stake. That is really a key point. What I also wanted to point out here is that once you have 2,500 ideas, only in a couple of months that you collected them, this is drastically going to change the dynamics of how our governments work and how they talk to citizens, because it really it's a serious burden on an administration to have to process this, to classify them, to put them together into clusters, to deduplicate them, to bring them to the right departments. A lot of very mundane tasks, but it transforms the way that our local governments also work if they open up more and more for participatory processes. Youth for Climate, so we're talking about the strikes and Friday. Well, here in Belgium, the youngsters, they have made use of our participatory platform to turn their anger, let's say, into constructive policy recommendations. They didn't just want to hit the streets and raise awareness, they also wanted to contribute to the policymakers, and that's why they reached out to us, and that they had their own participatory platform. They're the same 3,500 online participants, which was a good basis, 1,700 ideas. And those ideas have then been clustered into 15 separate priorities that have been presented to policymakers. Talking about, or referring to your question on language, I think that's also one of the strengths of technology that and especially for a country like Belgium, that suddenly you can have a dialogue between people speaking different languages with simultaneous auto-translations. And I think that's definitely something that is a strength of technology and that we should optimally use. So if I've got the time, just a couple of quick lessons learned. To summarize, first one is, as I said, citizens, they should not only participate in the consultation, but they should also be able to decide what the consultation is going to be about. They should be able to set the agenda, not only have top-down consultations on specific projects, should be in there too, but to install a more continuous democracy, citizens should start at the very start of the policy-making cycle, and they should have a say through, for instance, citizen initiatives in the agenda setting. The the process of decision making and the participatory process needs to be transparent. It's a key element here, not only for youngsters but for citizens at large. To ask someone or to ask a citizen to participate, it's giving up time that they could spend on other things. So it should be worthwhile, the experience of participating. And to make it worthwhile, well, a first step is to show how their contributions and how their time that they're going to invest in participating in the public debate is going to result into a broader outcome, in a broader democratic outcome. So it's really key to demonstrate how the process is structured and how decisions will be made. And then the last thing, what I said, and that I think is often underestimated, is we do not only need to train and inform the public, the citizens, we also need to care about our government, our institutions, and how to prepare them for the digital age and how they need to go engage with citizens. And that means, well, efficiency needs to come into workflow, and to do that every day or every week, we need to start institutionalizing workflows for them to make that easy. And I think the technology is available, so there are still steps to be taken, but there's a lot of potential out there. So those were the 3 learnings I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wietse. I think you've touched on a subject which is very close to my heart, which is how to institutionalize consultation and participatory processes, which go beyond the traditional ways of doing it in the European Union institutional setup. So I expect that more inputs will come from the audience when we open the discussion. Thank you. Our next speaker is Frida Seidel. Please, Frida, you have the floor.
Right. Hello, everybody. My name is Frida Seidel. I'm a teacher, and I'm going to talk about school, what happens in Saxon schools. And I'd like to pick up on one question Beatriz Porres put forward. Are we not using the right language? Don't we reach young people because we're not using the right language? I believe being able to talk about politics is a skill. It's a specialist skill that young people need to learn, and schools are the best place to learn that skill. I'm not saying that schools are the only place where this can be learned, but I'm sure they are the best places to learn that. It is important to make young people aware that political conflict is a normal, regular part of democratic life, and it can be dealt with in a respectful manner. Now, I'm going to introduce a best practice example that's happening at Saxon schools, a great learning tool, I feel. It's called European Students' Forums, and it has happened in schools all over Saxony. Since May 2017, 14 such European Students' Forums have already taken place. And please allow me to introduce these Students' Forums a bit, and then feel free to ask your questions. I'm happy to answer them. In these Students' Forums, high school students at vocational schools at the age range between 16 and 19 talk to high-ranking European politicians, local politicians, managers from enterprises, representatives from universities and NGOs, and last but not least, members of the European Committee of the Region. The point is to involve students in discussions with these guests, with these representatives, about issues young people can actually relate to. It is an in-depth, very efficient learning experience and an exercise in mutual respect and understanding. Let me briefly explain what happens, actually. As usual in such sessions, there is a morning panel session with meet and greet. People introduce each other, and then they split up into groups in which they discuss several issues. That's about 15 to 25 students in one group talking to 3 or 4 of their guests about several topics. like life in border regions. Saxony is a border region, education in Europe, Erasmus+, migration. We've also talked about Ireland and Brexit, and other topics. This discussion session goes on for about 60 minutes, and then everyone gets together in the panel again. There's a feedback session. The groups are introducing their results, so everyone is informed about what happened in the other groups. So it's one school day, actually, and it's a very efficient tool. The idea is the brainchild of Brigitte Gröger. She's the policy officer in the Committee of the Regions in the Saxon Liaison Office here in Brussels. Why does this deserve presenting here today? I believe, most importantly, these students' forums and panels are examples of political education, civic education at its best. And as I said earlier, talking about politics has to be learned. It's not something that just comes out of the air. This has to be learned and prepared. These sessions are a true learning experience, both for the students and for their guests. They are not just a talk show, a clash of opinions, or political views on opposing ends of the political spectrum. They are also a result of a long process, and that's the reason why I said schools are the best places to learn to talk about politics. In our case, about 6 weeks went by. Six weeks were spent on preparation. So it's not just one single day, one single event. It's a process in which people devote a lot of energy and time. Let me share some insights with you that I have learned during these students' forums. In preparing such debates, young people's knowledge and expertise must be built upon. We all know that young people are called digital natives, digital experts, but they need help. They need help in finding quality sources, in doing quality research, and this help comes from teachers. So they are well-informed partners in a well-informed discussion. This, in turn, leads to discussions that are based on facts rather than opinions or stereotypes. This also leads to enough confidence on the students' parts so they can actually talk to these high-ranking politicians they may have seen on television before but never met in real life. And it also leads to a growth in self-respect and the belief in their own abilities. As I said earlier, plenty of time is necessary to prepare this. This does not happen from one day to the next day. Students need to think and rethink certain aspects of this debate they are going through, and they need help from their teachers to prepare this. Lastly, and most importantly, the whole work, most of the work, is actually done by the students themselves. They prepare for the topics, they put up the setting, they do the interaction with their guests, they do the summary and the presentations. And this is the reason why these politicians or managers, these guests, can meet on an equal footing with the students, because the students just have enough self-confidence to put forward all their ideas because they've prepared them themselves, and the teachers helped, but that's all. Let me conclude what the partners will actually learn from this. Both partners learn something. From the adults' perspective, they will probably, most certainly, I think, get a renewed respect for young people. They will encounter them as equals. And secondly, they will meet a representative cross-section of the population. Schools, state schools, represent a cross-section of the population. They will also get an insight into young people's mindset. Where else can you get that other than in a school? And of course, they will receive some fresh feedback on their own work. And what will happen on the student side is they will experience first-hand meetings with official representatives. They will develop maybe a bit of an understanding that there are hardly any simple answers to difficult questions, and that politics is compromise. And last but not least, they will hopefully develop a knowledge-based interest in political issues. Let me conclude. Young people deserve to be taken seriously, and they only live up to our high expectations if we provide them with the necessary tools. And as I said before, schools are really, I'm a teacher, I have to say that schools are really the best places to do that. Young people who have learned to interact like this, and if it's just for one day, they will not fall victims to individuals or organizations that abuse their energy, their enthusiasm and idealism for some shady political purpose. What more can we expect from young people and from each other in this day and age? If you want more information, our desk outside is desk 13, right around the corner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frieder. I think you've touched on a very, very important issue, which is specifically the language and the need to prepare very young people so that they are able to learn how to discuss, how to compromise, how to understand politics, because that's, of course, the first step in order to be able to participate fully in policy making and decision making. Thanks a lot. Let's go to finish to Stefan Hannan, and the floor is yours, Stefan.
Thank you, Beatrice. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Stefan. Before I start, just a quick announcement. So I've been having pretty bad nosebleeds this week. I just wanted to announce it. If this were to happen during the panel, I'll just excuse myself. I just want to give you a fair warning, so apologize in advance. So I think Wietse and Frieder, they talked about language. I think Magdalena, you talked about how to bring people to the EU. Wietse also touched on that as well. And this wasn't planned, but I'd like to touch also on how young people are organizing, so your third question. So this wasn't planned, this is good. So I work at Hill & Knowlton, so we're an integrated communications consultancy here in Brussels. So I work for a range of private and public sector clients. In a past life, I was also a facilitator, so really focusing on designing and implementing participatory processes, including with young people on climate change or giving leadership trainings. So I think it's important that we just look at the context that we're living in right now. So you mentioned the climate strikes, of course. But how do young people organize themselves, and how are they already active? I think Frieder used the term, how are they already into political thinking? So question, does anyone know Vargas 92? Vargas 92, Vargas 92? No one. Perfect, that's good. So I didn't know either until 2 years ago. So who's Vargas 92? He is an incredibly famous influencer in France. I think now he's 20 years old. He has around 3 million followers on Snapchat, 1.5 on Instagram. And he, exactly 2 years ago, so November 2017, he was in Brussels. And he had called on his followers to come down to Place de la Monnaie, so very much downtown Brussels, to shoot a video with him. Now, what happened was hundreds of young people came down to Brussels, and police also showed up. Now, I don't think this is the focus right now to figure out who did what, but clashes ensued. There was some vandalism downtown as well, and there was some very superficial reporting about the profile of this particular gentleman. You know, he's a hooligan, all that kind of stuff. Now, flash forward 2 years to 2019, and Vargas has been doing posts about the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, about the famine there. He has worked with Brut to spend 24 hours with a French maritime rescue organization, doing posts about the refugee crisis. And he also visited Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh. So it sort of goes counter to the initial reporting. Now, Vargas is just one person. There's many, many others. I think another a great example is Priscilla Ludowski. Who knows her? No one. Okay, perfect. So she is one of the founders of the Gilets jaunes movement. So she is a French black woman, and she founded the Gilets jaunes movement while she was working on her online shop. So she was sort of a part-time entrepreneur and a full-time revolutionary. So really inspiring. And there's others. If you look at Germany, there was a YouTuber, young YouTuber, who posted a video about the incumbent government and criticizing their policies. And he usually did videos on music. Now, his very critical video got 7.5 million views and an extreme amount of engagement in just 1 week right before the elections. So this is sort of the context that we're operating in. And I think there's a few things that we can deduce from it is that young people are critical. They can be engaged on political topics if they're not already. And I think also important to point out is that these are digital communities and they manifest in physical spaces as well. So there's many ways to approach young people. We talked about tools before as well. Just one tool that I'd like to highlight that we do quite a lot is, so I'm a network coordinator in the InvestEU campaign for DG COM. So this is a public information campaign on EU investment impact. So this is led by our WPP team, our government practice team. So maybe some of my lovely colleagues are in the room right now as well. But we did, I'd say around 60 influencer collaborations in 16 different EU member states. And why do I want to use the example of influencer collaborations? Because they're often young people. There's apparently such a thing as silver influencers, though, which is interesting. But these are often young people that have an incredible following. I think that's what the Vargas case showed as well. So they form also a vehicle to get young people engaged in different topics. So let me give you a specific case. So we did an influencer collaboration in Finland. So this was a young influencer. Her name is Jonna, and she had an incredible following, or a very dedicated following rather, with 15 to 30-year-olds. And she was more the fashion lifestyle blogger and influencer. So she had a blog and she had an Instagram account. Around 15,000 followers, so it's still a micro influencer. Now, what did we co-create with her? Because even if this is a paid collaboration, but even if you pay someone, you still need to co-create the content. You can't dictate what these people can say. They have their own opinions. They have their own style. So what did we discuss with Jonna? She talked about female entrepreneurship. She talked about education. We had her fly, and this is perhaps one of the perks of being an influencer. We flew her to Italy to cover an EU-funded project on plastic pollution. And the engagement that she got on her posts were through the roof. So I think for her Instagram posts were around 10%, which is quite exceptional. Average views on her blog posts were 4 minutes. And again, this is one of the ways that you can get young people to be excited about societal topics. So it's one tool. The other approach that I'd still like to touch on, if I still have the time, is it's more about how do you listen to people. So this is an event that we did for the European Parliament a while ago. And this is more the direct engagement, right, where you're sitting with people in a room. And this implies also a different perspective and different kind of amount of resources as well. So this is really about long-term community building. How do you build networks? I think what a previous speaker said. And this is very much a two-way street. So you're in the room with these people, you need to listen to them, but at some point you also need to speak to them. I'd love to touch on that perhaps later on. So we had this was with the European Parliament, we had around 80 participants from civil society organizations. Many of those were youth organizations as well. And the focus of the event was quite simple. How can we work better together? So, we succeeded in our short-term goal in getting the youth, or to getting the voter turnout up. But now what do we do? What's our next objective? And so the question was asked, how do we work together? And we asked them during the event. Now, we had one session where we focused on, okay, what we call the practicalities of working together. So what did they say that they needed? They said, we want physical and digital spaces where we can collaborate together and exchange ideas. We want access to policymakers as well. We want the European Parliament to organize workshops on single issues. And we want technical trainings, video editing, communications. So to conclude, so my main two takeaways there was, it was really apparent that the European Parliament had already spent, or rather built up, a significant amount of capital with these organizations, just the amount of energy that they gave at this conference. And this was very much an interactive workshop as well. We wanted their ideas. But I think also one of the things we shouldn't forget is that we should be empowering them to speak more loudly and be more effective. And that's where I think we can help them by giving them training, by giving them the tools that they need as well. I think that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you to your nose, who is behaving properly so far. Yeah, interesting. Yes, interesting because I heard Wietse saying that social media is not a tool to run proper participation, but just communication. So maybe during the debate, we will have the opportunity to hear more of these contradictory positions, which are very, very interesting. Now, I would like to open the floor to you for questions, remarks, criticism, comments of any kind, for you to be aware that you can speak French if you wish. Our colleague interpreters are there ready to assist. Thank you to them. And we already have one request, so please go ahead. Can you introduce yourself first? Thank you.
Yes, of course. I'm from European Parliament Liaison Office in Latvia, and I would like to ask a question to Stefan. It's about influencers, and do you think that unpaid collaborations with influencers are still possible, for example, before European elections and so on? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other question for the moment? Yes, please.
Sorry. J'ai juste une question.
Just one quick question, which relates to what was said in the introduction. We notice that even though there are more and more people getting involved in things like Brexit, we nonetheless still have the impression that even if young people agree with the way the European Union works, they do kind of recognize its positive effects, but they don't see that as good enough justification to go and vote. So there's a real problem here when it comes to democracy, because it seems to me that people really feel that there's a kind of glass ceiling which makes it difficult for people to express themselves directly. So you talked about different experiences where people have tried to play a role and intervene, so the collaborative platforms and so on and so forth. But what we're seeing increasingly, and we've seen this with YouTubers in particular, of people trying to take power back, young people trying to take power back, saying that the European Union doesn't hear us. They can't hear us because even if we can advance in certain areas here and there, but our political voice is not strong enough to be heard. And so it seems to me there's a real problem, at least I perceive it as such. How can we make our voice heard in institutions which seem to be very complex and actually slightly disconnected from the problems that people have to deal with on a daily basis?
Merci beaucoup. Vous avez touché à des questions.
Thank you. You've touched upon a very interesting issue. I hope we'll be able to have a useful discussion on that.
Yes, hello. I'm Laura van Howard from WPP Government Practice. I have a question for Wietse, and it's more about the return of what the citizens give to you. So the idea is that you get a lot of information from them. What do you do in terms of feedback to the citizens that are involved in your processes? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please.
Yes, hi. I'm Tommaso from the Youth Outreach Unit of the European Parliament. I have a question also for Wietse. So, okay, the other day I received an invitation to attend a town hall in a town hall meeting in my commune. So I was quite surprised because I never received such an invitation. And before you mentioned that you kind of, you set as an example that you started your project because you think that this town hall meeting at 8 p.m. is not the best way to involve young people. But my question is, like, do you think that kind of in this transition from town hall meetings to digital consultation platforms, is there something that we actually lose, or they're just gains for kind of the quality of our democracies? Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you. Any other amateur? No? Okay, so maybe for the moment we stop here, we go back to the panel, and then I will open another round of questions, of course, no problem. Wietse, you want to start?
Yes, please. Let me start with the last question. I thought it was an excellent question. So the message I didn't want to bring is like digital is going to replace what's already happening offline. I think it's complementary to what is already happening, and that is, I think, a very important first notion. And then when we look at why would it be complementary, there are those two concepts of thin and thick engagement, like having very in-depth engagement and having more quantity. So you could see it as quantity and quality to some extent. And I do believe that a debate, and it's actually also referring to another question, that a debate, having people going to debate and deliberate, exchange on arguments with expertise that they've been given, is one of the best ways to actually come to empathy for the other and to come to a best collective outcome, so that democracy is not just a sum of the individual votes, because that is, for me, with the digital, definitely one potential threat, that we would go use it as a mean to consult citizens, and that we're going to look at the thumbs up, the thumbs down, and we're going to sum up and aggregate the preferences, because then it's going to be an expression of individual interest. And I do believe that that is the true challenge also for digital platforms like ours, is how do you blend the offline and the online? How do you create a debate in which people do listen to each other? That it's not only like an idea box in which everyone has their personal proposals. That is a true challenge, and this whole concept of deliberative democracy, I think we haven't cracked it yet, how we can bring that online. It's great to see that there are so many experiments these days, starting from Ireland, but if you look at the Citizen Convention in France going on climate these days, those are great experiments. For me, the big question is how can we bring such a system to scale? That is, I think, a very exciting question that I won't be able to give you the answer on right now, but that is something that's keeping me busy. If I can, shall I? Yeah? And then the other question on the feedback process, there was actually one slide that I skipped, and it was exactly the slide covering that. No, but there are two things how we cover feedback. I do want to stress again the need for a workflow, because that's the main. Why do I stress this element of efficiency and workflow? It's for exactly that, actually. They need to be able to treat all the feedback, all the input that comes in, because if you don't get the feedback from your government, you don't have the feeling that you are heard, and then next time you want to come back. So that's element number one. Pushing through, we use statuses and official comments, etc., a couple of functionalities to send out notifications and reminders to the civil servants. That's one, so to give feedback, to shorten, because policy cycles, often they take a lot of time, can take months, but if you give intermediary feedback on in which stage the proposal is currently, that's already very valuable to the citizens. And then the second thing is tracking implementations, so that the people, the policymakers, they can be they can be held accountable, so you have an overview of what are all the proposals by citizens, all the initiatives that have been accepted and implemented, and that you can actually follow the whole life cycle of those proposals. So yeah, definitely a key element to keep citizens engaged continuously.
Thank you. Stefan, can you react?
Sure, yeah. Let me also pick up on what Wietse just said. So thin and thick is something, a new concept to me, but I think that's what I tried to show with my two examples as well, is that there's, I think, as deep engagement where you're sitting in a room with people. Perhaps you might have less reach, but you will get more in-depth perspectives from them. And then where you do have a larger reach is through these paid influencer collaborations. So I don't think we necessarily disagree. I think it's different tools in our toolbox that we should be using as well. About the unpaid collaboration, so what we see is there's an increasing trend toward professionalization in the influencer sector. It just makes it very, and we always say, oh, we want to go beyond a transactional relationship, but in practice, it's still you're paying for something. That being said, if, for example, you have an ongoing paid collaboration with an influencer, if you have a good relationship with them, if you co-create content with them, you don't, straitjacket them too much, you can get freebies as well. And I would also argue that in the long term, you also build a relationship with them. It doesn't mean that your contract is over, that you can't talk to them about other topics that you've, because you have that relationship built, right? And then the final question that I wanted to touch on as well was we're not, that young people are not being heard enough, and that we need to take back power. I think it's also what I see is perhaps an issue of credibility, and there's many ways that you can build that. Of course, one is representation, so more young people in the European Parliament, more young MEPs, but also disenfranchised communities as well. I think that's really something that should be a priority in the EU bubble as well. But also when it comes to credibility, it's being in a position to give back, and it's not, you don't use those engagement processes as a tick-the-box exercise, but you're actually able to give back and you build trust that way. And I think in the long term, that's how you can get people to regain confidence in our electoral systems and in our democracies as well.
Thank you. Magdalena, maybe you can come with some replies to the contribution on, lack of trust in political processes, young people not being heard by politicians. You come from the European Parliament, maybe you can have more in-depth views on how to tackle that very specific problem.
Yes, thank you. Well, I agree a little bit with Wietse and Stefan on the fact that you have this two ways of interacting, of having young people interacting with politicians or with the decision makers or with the institution. It can be this face-to-face interaction that we try to provide, and a lot of our work geared at young people in DG COM is to provide these possibilities. We also work locally, so it's not only the things that we do inside in Brussels or in Strasbourg, but we also do it in member states. And then there is also this possibility of having them engaged on digital platforms. And indeed, as you were saying, I think it's not the first time that the young people revolt, or that they distrust the political system and they go to the streets, or they find other spaces where to express themselves. This happens almost with every new generation, and it's a question of civic education. It's a question of embracing it from the point of view of the institution, and not just saying, okay, we are not talking to you because you are not talking our language or you are not following the rules, but to creating the space where this can be taken on board. So this can be done through events that we try to organize in a participatory way, in an open way, in a co-created way. But it can also be happening on online platforms. So I actually pretty much follow the idea that we need to give possibilities also for young people to express themselves on the platforms and to give them feedback on these platforms as well. We also try to do this now in the European Parliament with the community of young people that got very much engaged in the last election campaign. We had more than 300,000 followers, not followers actually, we call them volunteers, so people who wanted to spread the word about the importance of going voting by their own means within their own circle of friends. And so now we are looking into the ways how we can continue working with them and making sure that their voice is heard. So I don't think we can expect that the institutions will change radically, but definitely, especially in the European Parliament, we are attending and listening ear, and we try to embrace that need.
Thank you very much. In the meantime, any other questions, ideas, please?
Thank you very much for your contributions. I'm very much wondering, you're using influencers and channels to get to young people, but of course Europe is not only made for young people, it's also made for old people. So how do you actually use young people to also speak to older people?
So I'm assuming that's directed to me. God, that's a good question. Now I was mentioning before in the InvestEU campaign in Poland. I don't know if Jarek is still here. Okay, perfect. What HNK in Poland did was they used silver influencers. So these are old influencers to get in touch with, to actually communicate about an EU-funded project it's called Green Care Farms. And basically it's they're trying to tackle isolation of elderly people in rural areas, and they organize these farms where they do joint activities. When I see the pictures of this product, it sort of gives me a lot of appetite to be retired as well. So what we did there is we use those silver influencers also as a way to better target an old audience. But that being said, I should check their follower base, but I would assume that those old influencers also have a young following as well. Some of them are quite eccentric. Now, how do you do the opposite? I don't think I can give you the answer right now, but thank you.
Hello, I'm Marisa, and I'm a master's student in political communication. And so first of all, I wanted to thank you because it's the first time that I've actually assisted in anything where I felt kind of understood in being a young person in Europe and trying to understand all these institutions. And I think it's kind of a general question. I quite agree with the idea that I personally believe that all this needs to start with civic education. So for example, in France, where I live, in high school, we have civic education, but it's just the teacher that is basically talking to the class and telling them, well, there's this, this, and this. And I think the problem is that because we want young people to feel this European identity, it's not natural. It's not something that you feel. I feel French quite naturally, but I don't feel this European identity. So I think this starts in like you said, Mr. Sedil, sorry if I don't pronounce it well, it starts with the civic education and having young people engage with these discussions with elected civil servants is really interesting, because when we say young people, we usually think, oh, digital space, oh, hashtags. it's not just that. Young people, the only thing that they truly want is the tools to be able to communicate with people in positions of with decision makers. So if we give these tools, so not only concentrating in the digital space or in events that are reserved to people who are already politicized, that's what I was kind of skeptic about with these different events that are very good. I know that my class will be participating, my organizations in which I am a member are going to be participating, but we shouldn't leave beside the young people that don't have this political culture. And that's why I think it really, really is important to invest in this education, because the civic education is actually going to be the key for them to not, instead of having influencers, that I think it's a really good idea to have collaborations with influencers, but the engagement, how do you translate that in the physical space? This stays on the digital space. I'm going to like a post, but is that going to mean that I am going to go and vote and have an engagement? It doesn't really translate. So if you go all the way down, so bottom up, if you go all the way down and into education, how can we basically mix all these different brilliant ideas and concentrate them on the spaces that are the most crucial, and have, instead of having a minority of young people who are politicized, have these different people just, I don't know, sorry, I'm kind of losing my words, but what I'm saying is that I think really education is the key, and using the digital space in education, and not just thinking that young people are just going to be tweeting and going on Instagram. It's much larger than that. All we want is to feel represented and to understand and to feel that we have the ability to speak with these high-placed people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very reassuring that you tell us that you feel that there is some sort of listening to you as a young person, which is what we are all trying to do very, very hard. So, Frieder, do you want to react?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for saying that education is the key. I appreciate that. I think it all comes down to human contact. I do believe that the internet is a good place for political education. And what you said, this is brilliant, but I work at a school, and what I'm seeing is that contact, human contact, is the essential thing. There is enough information out there. People are, they think they are informed enough, but it all comes down to people don't want more information, they want more human contact. They want to see their representatives, they want to see civil servants, they want to talk to managers, they want to learn about where is my future going to go from an expert. And this, establishing this human contact, this is a long uphill road, and it's not going to be easy. And when you said in the beginning, we have to bring the EU to young people. Yes, I absolutely agree. We have to bring the EU to young people. Of course, we can also bring young people to the EU with several measures, but I think it's not done enough that EU representatives go out and spread the word and show themselves in several institutions. It doesn't have to be schools only, but being a teacher, I'm talking about schools. So this is probably going to take years, but I think we finally have to start doing that more. I mean, it's happening, but we have to do that a lot more often. This is not happening enough. And then people will see that human contact is real, and there are people that talk to me, and I have the facilities, I have the ability to talk to them. I'm not speechless, and I can do that. It's different if you have a screen in front of your eye than if you have a real person with eye-to-eye contact, and I think that helps a lot. And I personally think that's the only key to success here. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add to that. I don't think it's perhaps a productive discussion to go, okay, it's either. I just wanted to give you an example of how digital channels can enforce or reinforce rather physical communities as well. So there's a festival that was organized, I think, in 2018. It's called Ebanfest. So it's a, don't know if anyone heard of that one, Ebanfest? Third time? No, okay. And so Ebanfest is a festival celebrating Black and women of color. And actually there's a great book about this that talks about how this event was only organized through Instagram. So all the promotions were via stories, the program updates about the program via stories as well. It was an exclusive event, so that meant you only had access to, you could only follow the Instagram account if you had, I think, 2 other people in common. But the community quite snowballed around this Instagram account. And if you read about the experiences that people had there, it was, well, you know, we're in this physical space, but I recognize you because I follow you on Instagram, and it's an easy way to connect that way as well. And I think we should, again, look at it from the perspective of that both, you know, the digital, the online and the offline world can very much reinforce each other as well.
I wanted to add, yeah, first of all, it's lovely to see your engagement too. But I think that it's a great thing that is happening, actually, also having worked with Youth for Climate, that 10 years ago we might have been talking about how to get the young people engaged, but now we're talking about how can we turn that engagement into constructive dialogue, which is a way more interesting question. The only thought I was having when because we are always using here the youth, the youngsters, but also within youngsters there are many people with different opinions, and I think in civic education that is really key, that we don't only communicate as, well, we want the youth, but that in civic education that we have enough, or that we teach enough the skill of listening to people with different stakes, different opinions, and learn how to deliberate. I think there's a real opportunity there. And to make the link to the question of someone else earlier, how fantastic would it be actually if young people, rather than just staying in the classroom, because those classrooms, they're often the same. You have an elitist school, or you have a school with kind of a group, same age, same thoughts often. But if they are sent into practice, they attend a town hall meeting, and there they learn how to participate in local politics in a safe environment, actually, that they can express their thoughts, but especially they can listen to people with very different opinions. I think that would be, yeah, an interesting experience.
I'd like to come back to that language idea, and building on what you said. I took part in a citizens' dialogue in Sibiu in Romania earlier this year. Maybe you've heard about it. And we discussed several issues there, and one of them was communication. And all of us in our discussion group said, well, what about people, young people, first of all, who don't speak English well enough to join the discussion? Multilingualism is a great goal, but in the end, I don't want to hurt anybody, but in the end, it all comes down to English. I mean, look at us today. We have French and English. What about those people probably learning at vocational schools who don't speak English well enough to participate? They are completely left out of the discussion. And you can here refer to the internet, online, or eye-to-eye contact. It doesn't matter. They are completely left out. And I think the danger persists that European ideals are becoming elitist ideals because some people, lots of people, just cannot take part because they cannot speak our language. First of all, English or French, and secondly, this political language that it takes to make your voice heard, to say what you think. To tell you the truth, I don't really know how to solve that problem. Well, good English and French classes at school, first of all. And I don't want to put my profession in the center of everything here, but I think we should rethink the role schools play. There's not enough done at schools to teach young people about politics. As you said earlier, there is a civics education teacher standing in front of the young people doing his or her work. That's not enough. That's by far not enough. This is the old school regular thing, and people sooner or later switch off. We have to have some fresh approach to certain things. And what we are discussing here, I think, are very, very good examples for fresh ideas and fresh approaches. And I'm glad I'm here today and can listen to all of this. I think a lot more of this is necessary to reach people, to reach young people, and to reach people who probably have never, ever taken part in a political discussion. I think that's extremely important, because those people then fade away and we'll never be able to reach them if we don't counteract.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say I really feel what you're saying about this need for human contact, and the fact that we are here in Brussels and we often, as institutions, tend to address ourselves to the so-called usual suspects. And in the European Parliament, in DG COM, we have a wide variety of different activities, and we realize that we need to, this is the single most important issue, is like how to make sure that each time we have an activity for young people in a member state or in Brussels or in Strasbourg, that we don't get the same people coming or the same type of people coming. So I wanted to give two examples. It's a process. It takes a lot of resources, a lot of money to put it in place, but we are working on it. So for the European Youth Event for next year, what we have done is that for this edition, we really made an effort to actually use the certain amount of financial contribution that we give to groups of young people. To actually give it not to groups coming by recommendation of someone, but to give it to some sort of disadvantaged young people. So we established that disadvantaged young people, there are people who, young people who are active in their own environment or who would like to discuss things, but either they don't speak the language or they don't have the money to actually cover for the travel costs to Strasbourg, or they come from a rural area or very remote area, which is very complicated to travel from. And okay, it's a drop in the ocean, but I think it's a right step. And we had a call that just ended for around 50 groups that we could help. We got 400 applications. We also had disabled groups applying. So we are aware of this, and I think this is definitely something that we want to improve in all our activities to make sure that we have a diverse young audience. And second thing about the vocational schools and going a little bit off the beaten track. So the European Parliament has this program that's been running for 3 years now, which is called the European Parliament Ambassador Schools. Basically, it's a set of European it's the set of classes ready for the teachers to use with the students about Europe, politics, voting, the European Union, etc. And it's a program which is basically given for free, and we want to have it distributed, or we want to have the schools from smaller towns and villages, and from often vocational schools. So this is exactly the targeting. We don't want to go to capitals, and we don't want to go to the elitist lycée. So we try to make it easier for the teachers, and I don't know if in Saxony there is a school that uses this scheme, but it's growing. We have more than 1,300 schools all over Europe that are in this scheme, and we hope to grow it even more. But it takes time. Thanks.
Hi. Yes, I have a question for Stefan, actually. So in your experience in HNK, so is there a different way how private companies and public institutions approach young people as an audience? So basically, what levels of segmentations are they asking for, and how your company responds to it?
Yeah, thank you. Please.
First of all, thank you very much. My question concerns what we were discussing before about, for instance, the European Ambassador School and the need to actually deal with the needs of the students and the teachers working at a very, very societal level. And my previous experience before being a humanitarian in the European Parliament has been as working as a youth worker. So I work for youth organizations, so organizing, for instance, the Erasmus Plus project. So many projects which aim to connect, to create this contact that we need to establish between between the EU institution and the very, very societal level. My sensation sometimes is that we have a gap concerning communication at this point. What it means that sometimes the students feel this kind of extreme institutionalization in communication from the European institution. And from my personal experience, sometimes I also see that sometimes teachers might have problem as well to be innovative, maybe creative. So my question would it be maybe now the moment to try to improve this strategy to help these youth workers and these youth organizations working at a very, very, very low level of the society to work with students, helping teachers, helping the EU institution as well to fill this gap in communication, but also in having like a network of ideas to stick together and to create like a real youth strategy and a real communication between these two worlds.
So, Stefan and Frida.
All right, thanks for that question, Tommaso. That's an excellent question. So I remember there, I think this is the WPP Leaders Report that talked about what kind of obstacles do government officials see when it comes to engaging with citizens. So there's some overlap. But two things. One is bureaucracy and risk aversion. So they saw this as the two biggest obstacles for reaching out to citizens. And I would have to say in terms of is there a real difference between private and public institutions that way? Not that I've seen, but I can give you a good example of how we've overcome that. So I've been working quite a lot for Nespresso on sustainability, and that includes paid influencer collaborations, but also direct engagements and formats. So right now, for example, we're doing a student roundtable early December with a student group that is particularly focused on the Sustainable Development Goals. And it will be a closed-door format where we will be facilitating an engagement with about 20 students, where among other things, Nespresso will be presenting their sustainability and recycling approach. So what we've been doing with Nespresso in particular is we've been developing their narrative and their messages for a very long time. I think that's really important if you want to overcome the sort of risk, that perceived risk rather, so preparation, developing credible messages. What I also think is, I think it was mentioned before, is humility. I think in Nespresso they know that they have a lot of work to do, and that it's been a very long journey for them, and being in a position to listen. So it's a mix of developing your story, creating credible messages, being humble. I think those are key elements that both private companies and public institutions can overcome their fears of engagement. Does that make sense?
Yes, but my question was more towards if they see how these two entities see young people as an audience, because I think that also on what we were saying today, that as communicators we might encounter the risk of having this bit of kind of old person approach of seeing young people as one big audience. by missing completely the diversity and the complexity. So in your work, do you see private companies like being more aware of this rather than public institutions seeing this as a whole? So like, what is your experience like in your daily work?
Right. I think that was the other part of your question. So when it comes to segmentation, I don't think we've gotten that far with some of the private companies that I work with. So I think it's the opportunity presented itself. We reached out to this association. We said, look, would you be interested in doing a roundtable? And we just took it from there. Now, I'm sure there's all kinds of audience insights that we sometimes discuss with Nespresso as well about different segments within their younger target audience. But I think we're more focused on reaching young people as a priority target in general without having too much of a segmentation in there.
Thank you. And Frieder, there was something for you.
Right. If I understand your question correctly, you are asking, is a network a good idea between European institutions and schools? Of course it is. In Saxony, we have this liaison officer, Frau Gröger, who's sitting right behind you there. I think she's the important part of this network. And what I think is we have to create some outcome. I don't know whether new institutions are the right answer. I believe we have to go to people and talk to them. And I'm not sure if a new network, a new institution is the right answer to that. To tell you the truth, I don't really know what can be done on the part of the EU other than send out people and talk to young people at schools. What you, Magdalena, said, I think is a very good thing. Contact people in remote areas. Do not concentrate on the big cities. Just go where the people are. So networking, yes, but always focused on outcome, on real outcome, on talks, on results, on human contact. I'm wondering about these Friday for Future demonstrations, and I think they are an outcry for help. I don't think it's all about the climate there. Sometimes I think, don't we see that these young people just say, talk to us. We are here too. It's us. Look at us. It's us. It's young people. We have a voice. And of course it's about the climate, but it's just the second thing. They want to be talked to. They want to be heard. We are the people. Finally talk to us. And I think it's the wrong answer to walk up to them and say, you are right, you are right. We hear you. Your climate demands are okay. We have to change our politics. They want different answers. I think they also want to be contradicted sometimes. So I think this is what should be happening. Sincere human contact. And if your question goes into that direction, yes. If networks are necessary, networks of people who just go out and talk to people in their own language. That's what I think.
Yep, please.
Yes, listen me? Yes. Okay, I used to want enter a little in the phone, in the deep of the problem. In first time, the information is always power. It's not. It's a tool for propaganda. We are in the post-truth age. I want to say the start of the project in the 60s is a project military. The internet is a project military. It's not a tool of UNESCO. It's a project of the DARPA of the Pentagon. Okay, it is another thing. The content majority of the internet is propaganda, publicity, and used to addictive the young people overall for the shopping. In third question, because I am just in probation, it is a problem for overall for the health of the children, because the children have not formation for to filter the content. It's a problem for all people because it's a strong addictive, the screens, and it is a project to addictive the people. I think in the future we have problems socials, how in California now, with the people with drugs, with different drug addiction. Okay, just this.
Anyone want to react? Anyone from the audience wants to react? Go ahead. Okay, we have a brave one.
Sure, internet was kickstarted by DARPA, and it was a military application, but I think it's what? Sorry.
It's the history. Yeah,
the history, sure. But sure, no, I agree. But to suggest that there's only misinformation and disinformation on the internet, I think is a bit of a stretch. Again, I think we've discussed plenty of examples today that show that digital communications, digital connections are genuine, and they can lead to physical communities as well. And just to touch on your point about screen addiction, sure, that I think that's a legitimate issue for young people, but then again, there's also a lot of data that suggests that older people are also becoming more addicted to their screens, and their screen times are also increasing. So I think that's my comment.
Thank you. Probably as any tool in the world can be used for good and for bad. Huh? It depends. We have reached the 6 o'clock time, end of our discussions. I took a lot of notes. I will not bore you with what I might consider my conclusions for this workshop, because, as I said at the beginning, this is not for you to listen to me, but for the podium to listen to you. And if we have had a little bit more time, I would have liked to turn the room around and ask questions to you, for you to tell us. But because this is not you and us, this is all of us together, despite the setup of the room. What maybe I would like to suggest is that you get out of this room thinking whether actually everything that was said and proposals and ideas that were issued here, are they valuable or not? Are they things that we can all build on or not? I think there are many of them who really are. I regret personally that we didn't go into the sustainability of networking, of social media, of communities created by influencers. How long will they take? How can we make them how can we avoid that they just become an ephemeral thing that will die maybe the day the influencer will find a job and will not have time to build on his network, you see? So maybe that is something that is important to consider and to examine for a future debate, also building on what Wietse was talking about, how to institutionalize, meaning how to make sustainable all this, and how to go from digital to physical world, which is the human aspect of it, and which is what we all are longing for a more human dialogue and contact and empathy. And I would like to believe that actually what you are doing as young people, and what we are all doing thanks to new technologies and social media, is actually enlarging democracy. It's a slow process. Magdalena mentioned it. It will not happen tomorrow, but we are really doing this. I mean, politicians have understood very clearly that they need to listen to what young people have to say, that they need to go through untraditional channels, unconventional channels of communication, and they have to react to that. So that is enlarged democracy, that is proper democracy, and I think this is an important positive note for us to finish the debate, unless you want to contradict me. Thank you very much.